Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing out there? Well, let's see if people are here already tonight. Okay, I'm going to check the chat. Perfect. All right. Hello, everyone. Let me know if you're there. Curious. Oh, yes, Linda. Hi, Linda. How are you doing tonight? That's awesome. Linda's the first one on. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, oh, whoops. Something just happened here. Oh, there we go. I'm back. Good old technology. Gotta love it. Oh, Dorothy from Victoria. Hey, David, how are you doing? Hope you guys are doing well out there. Denise is here as well. Great to see the family joining in tonight, you guys. That's awesome. Denise and David and a whole group of them are people that come to the One of a Kind show every year. So, hey, Roxanne, how are you doing tonight? Hope you're doing well. Yeah. Oh, Marla. Hi, Marla. Marla's one of our team, one of our wild ones out in Saskatchewan. You could meet her at the Waskasiu Gallery, so she's here. Jerry, okay, awesome. Janine's here. Steve Parker's here from Quincy, Illinois. Right on, Steve. Great to always have the people from the United States. Oh, Tatiana, hello over there. Glad that you're joining in tonight. Natasha, Tatiana, and maybe Thomas as well. Okay, we're just getting people coming in slowly. I know we're kind of early already. Put an offer out there while you're waiting, you guys. You could click on that offer if you want. Can people see the offer? Just give me a heads. Someone message me if you can. So the offer there is the new print releases that came out yesterday as part of our Colorful Relationships Wine and Cheese in Canmore. Beautiful night with great people. Keith and Sandra were there, and they're saying hi, Keith and Sandra. So. Great. Okay. Thank you, Janine. So you can see the offer there. You can click on that. All of the new prints, the 10 new prints that we released last night are on the website, right on the home page. You can look through the feed that comes across the top and then the images down below as well. So really happy to be sharing new images with everyone. Very exciting wine and cheese last night. It was awesome. Well attended. So thank you all that some of you are probably joining here tonight as well. So thank you. And yeah, just a wonderful night. So, all right, I've got my furry friend here who's joining me every once in a while. So if I do get interrupted, everyone needs to know that it's just a furry friend. So, all right. Hi, Jennifer from Calgary. All right. Kirby, good evening from Thornbury, Ontario. Awesome. Great to have you. Yeah, we'll wait just a little bit. There should be a few more people signing on. We're at about 70 right now. So a few more people coming, I think. Anyway, we'll see. Oh, hi, Renee. Awesome. Support the land fund. I love that. That's awesome. I agree. Support the land fund. Keep collecting my work. I'm sure all of you know out there that 6% of every sale goes to our land fund. We have 1,600 acres, and we look forward to adding more to the land fund as time goes on. So hi, Brenda. Thank you, Karen, for your kind comment. I appreciate that. And a beautiful piece right behind here. This is entitled Colorful Relationship. So you'll see that as one of the new releases. That's a beautiful shot from Abraham Lake area, the largest human-made artificial lake in Alberta, damming situation. So sometimes the trees get flooded. Just creates a beautiful scene in the fall time. So but please check those out online. New Hamburg, Ontario. Darren, I don't know where New Hamburg is, but that's awesome. Thank you for joining. Janet and John from Calgary, thanks again for last night. You're welcome, Janet. That was great that the two of you could attend. And congrats on your new pieces that will be arriving. So thank you. Hello from Kansas, Norma and Candice. Awesome. Some more people from the United States. Okay. Well, I'm going to start off with a poll right now. Let's begin with a poll. Let's see where everyone is joining us from. I'm going to publish the poll here, so you should all get this shortly. You can click on where you're joining us from this evening. All right, so are you from Western Canada, Eastern Canada? Western Canada tends to win this every time we do this nature night. So You know, we've got to pick it up there. United Kingdom, United States, or Eastern Canada. I'm joking. I'm joking. So, yeah. Okay, it's looking interesting tonight. We have a few more people joining us from the United States than usual, so that's great, percentage-wise. Awesome, awesome. United Kingdom, that's great. Australia, nobody, another part of this beautiful world, no one from there. Okay, it looks like everybody's kind of clicked on. Things have stopped. So we have 62% of you are from Western Canada. Thank you again to the community in Western Canada. 26% from Eastern Canada. Thank you to that community out there that's alive and vibrant. Niagara-on-the-Lake, Toronto, and beyond. Northern Canada, no one's joining us from there this evening. United States, thank you to that community down there. 8% of our guests tonight. Thank you so much. And the United Kingdom, 2%. We love having all of the visitors that come and visit our galleries from all throughout the world and celebrate Canada with us. So thank you so much for joining, everyone from everywhere. So, okay, well, I think we'll begin. We've kind of got a few more people coming in slowly, but we'll start the slide presentation. I'll just check the chat. Is there anything? Oh, wow, Western Canada, Mark, okay, Texas, awesome. Okay, let's begin with, let me start the slideshow here. Okay. All right, so for those of you that couldn't join us last night, or for those of you that were there, I just want to again say that you can visit our website. I believe I have the offer up, and there was 10 new print releases, 10 new images, excuse me, released last night. And why was this release entitled Colorful Relationships? Well, because all of you are colorful people, and nature is colorful, and the whole community of All in the Wild is a very colorful community. So I think of all the people that I meet in the galleries, all the people that my team meets in the galleries, and just some of the great stories that we share about all of you. So thank you so much, and just what we're doing together as a group and as a community. So that's why it was entitled Colorful Relationships. And this particular image that you're seeing here was titled Colorful Relationships. So the relationship between the plants, the water, just all the colors of nature, and it's a really serene setting, something from Abraham Lake area. So I want to thank you all again for being a part of All in the Wild, and I want to thank my team. Some of them are on here tonight who are behind me and continue to join in our mission to basically celebrate nature through my images, and then give back to nature through the purchase of lands for conservation. So we're very much about conservation and advocacy. Tonight, I want to discuss, should the Arctic have a voice? And I think many of you know that I'm very, very passionate about this part of the world. I did my master's in biology on Arctic fox, and it's a place that's dear to my heart. It's a place where not many people get to visit, I know, but it's a place that I've been fortunate to go to because it is just ingrained in me to be one of those places. And we'll start off with a short little video here just to kind of, give you a sense of the Arctic. All right. Yeah, beautiful scene here in the north. This is a 16-hour time lapse of the Arctic, or 16-hour, excuse me, and kind of cut down into 30 seconds. And I think it's beautiful to watch the Arctic Ocean ice, or the Arctic Ocean out there along the ice floe edge, and how the tide changes, and all of a sudden the water starts moving in the opposite direction just right there. And the clouds, the skies, this is in late April. And at that time, you only get really 3 or 4 hours of darkness north of the Arctic Circle in some locations. And we know that the Arctic can be a very dark place. In wintertime, they can have 24 hours darkness. And I'm just going to get back to, okay. Sorry about that, everyone. And they can have 24 hours darkness. And some of these amazing skies that happen, they get very long light, and that's partially depending on the time of year. When you think of 16 hours of daylight or whatever it might be, those sunsets and sunrises are long and very, very special for a nature photographer to be able to take advantage of that long light. When we think of the Arctic, we think of an area that is just north of the tree line. Okay, so there's going to be that transition zone known as the taiga, where there is some stump trees like the trees you see in this image here. these trees might be 100, 200 years old. Yeah, that's as tall as they would be. I mean, you think of 100 or 200-year-old trees in the boreal forest of Canada, they would be 100 feet tall, 80 feet tall. And as you go further and further north, you get to a situation where there is no trees. There's just very shrubbed, kind of stunted growth shrubs, very short vegetation. And you get to an area where you can see forever and ever, except in the mountainous regions of the Arctic, of course. And so that's kind of the transition. And very few people, okay, maybe less than 10% of Canada's population live in Canada's Arctic. Very few species live in Canada's Arctic, but actually in terms of numbers of individuals, they can be quite numerous if we look at some of the populations of animals up there. But it's quite a desolate area, quite a area where life struggles to kind of make a living, for sure. It's a harsh environment and tough to be able to eke a living out of. And as I mentioned, you get some amazing nights up there because of total darkness. This was a few years back when I was on the ice road north of Yellowknife. It's a road that you can travel up on. You have to have radio communication and such. It's the ice road up to 3 different mines in northern Canada. One of them being a diamond mine, the other 2 being gold mines. And on those roads, there will be trucks hauling supplies up, whatever it may be. And the trucks are going every 20 minutes on those ice roads. So every 20 minutes, there's a truck going down the road. And you have to be careful on there, but also it does impact the nature, and it impacts it in many different ways. So when we look at that, each mine requires somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 million liters of fuel is trucked up. So that's in the neighborhood of 120 million liters of fuel is trucked up on those ice roads. They need all their supplies for the entire year. So as much of the dry food that they can bring, any of the machinery that they require, the tires. I've been to one of the mines where there's just a football field of abandoned tires of vehicles. So it takes a lot to extract some of these resources that are not really actually required by humans. We don't really require diamonds. We seldom really need gold. But these mines are lucrative because it is something that we have put value on as humans. And the Arctic is a place where there's these vast spaces, this beautiful light, and the creatures up there, like the caribou, just exist. They just do their thing. And caribou have existed there for many thousands of years, but they're struggling. When we talk to some of the ice road truckers, as they're called on the television, what was interesting was just how they spoke about some of the individuals that had been driving there for many years. Spoke about 20, 30 years ago, there was times where their trucks would be stopped because the caribou would be migrating across the ice road, and they might be waiting for 2 or 3 hours till those caribou crossed. But that's not the case now. Things have changed. And so I'm actually going to do a quick poll here. I'm just curious what our education level is on our populations of caribou and what people know about caribou in Canada's north. So I'll ask you the question, how much have barren ground caribou populations declined in the last 2 decades? What do you guys think is the number? Yeah, so in the last 20 years, how much have our caribou populations declined in Canada's north? Okay, everybody's coming in with some, we'll just let everybody get a chance to do it here. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. It looks like it's settling down here. So I'm ending the poll, and 5% of you thought that the populations have declined by 20%. 44% of you thought that it was 50%, and 50% of you thought that it was 70%. The 50% group of people out there, you are correct. Caribou populations are in a very steep decline. It's actually worrisome for some people, biologists, obviously the people who subsistently live off of caribou up there as well are finding it tougher and tougher to find what they call country food. And these caribou populations, they will live on the barren grounds. They're known as barren ground caribou, but they'll come down to the taiga, especially in the winter. They'll come down to the taiga to find lichens, to feed on various different food sources. They don't need much to survive, actually, which is really surprising, but that's just the way this species is. They're incredible in terms of their ability to survive off of very little. And sorry, just going back to the presentation here. And you find that when we look at caribou populations, they actually, well, this is a great map to show you where the Arctic is. They exist all through the Nunavut territory, all up through the islands that you see there that make up the Arctic, into the northern parts of the Northwest Territories where I was, and into the Yukon. And across the board, they're in decline. That's just the reality of what's going on with that species. Beautiful species, beautiful in terms of their gentleness. Years ago, I was in a herd of 50,000 caribou, if you can believe that. And this is when their numbers were quite high. And I was hidden in some rocks, and I had caribou brushing off my shoulders as they were migrating through. And the insect life was just unbelievable. You couldn't believe the insects. And these guys can lose a pint of blood every day to insect life. So when they're actually migrating across the tundra in these big migrations, they actually do something called tandering, where they're actually going in a big circle. And those individuals that are in the middle of the migration herd, they get out to the outer edges where they'll get some wind and get some of that insect life off of them. Because actually some caribou can succumb to the fact that there's so much insects on them, and that loss of blood in reality. And some of the migrations can be quite beautiful to see. I haven't been in a herd like that in a long time. The biggest herd that we saw was what you're seeing here, is a photo of about 100 to 150 individuals when we were up on the ice roads. And just 20 years ago, there would have been herds of easily 5,000, 10,000 individuals. So things have really changed when it comes to the caribou. I want to show you this beautiful video of a situation where that herd of 100 or so, for whatever reason, got spooked and ran. And it really made me kind of think about the species and what they're facing. They're a threatened species in Canada, in case you didn't know that. They're not considered endangered yet, but it's not too far away that our caribou population will be considered an endangered species. Look at that. Wow, eh? There was wolf tracks in the area, so whether they picked up the scent of a wolf in the area that I didn't see, I'm not sure. You'll see some of the individuals there still have their antlers. The females keep their antlers. They're the only species from the deer family that have antlers, are the females, or the only species where females have antlers. And those antlers are used for that purpose, is to protect themselves against wolves. That's the primary reason for that. So when we look at things that are changing up in the Arctic, a big part of the reason that we're having caribou numbers, caribou decline, caribou survival rates coming down, is partially what they're eating. I mean, historically, it is known from Inuit peoples that caribou went through quite big, they went through periods of steep decline like they are now. The Inuit peoples talked about times where they couldn't find caribou, where they almost could starve, or were almost starving. But we have to understand that was in times where we didn't have the science and the research technologies that we have now. And we know that caribou are very, very declined in terms of numbers, population numbers. Part of the reasons, well, the resource extraction has opened up a lot of areas where that makes it easy for wolves to travel. So we know that in certain areas, there's wolf calls going on to try to mitigate that. That's not going to solve anything, in all honesty. We also know that global climate change is occurring. We have the recent UN report that is saying, hey, listen, we have to get this under control. We're getting to a dire end here. And that's impacting the Arctic in a huge way. We have very few different species up there. We have very few people that live up there, but some of the biggest brunt of the changes that are occurring on the globe are occurring in that region of Canada, in the Arctic. And so we start to see forest species like moose. They live in the boreal forest, but they're now being seen quite high up into these Arctic lands, onto the tundra. And why? Because the vegetation you see that these two mother and calf moose are running through, that vegetation of shrubs, well, that's becoming more and more. It's having a better opportunity to grow up there. The climate isn't as harsh, so the vegetation isn't as stunted. And the moose have now the ability to live up there because they have their food up there to survive upon. So it kind of ends up impacting the caribou in another way. So climate change is a big part of the caribou decline, as is the resource extraction, which opens up hunting opportunities for indigenous peoples, and then also for the wolves to be able to go and find their prey a little bit easier. So we have the species of muskox that also lives up there, and this is a species that is more closely related to goats and to sheep than it is to deer or it is to bison. This species survived the last ice age 20,000 years ago at the peak. And why is that? Because they require very few resources to survive. They have this amazing shaggy outer coat. The Inuits call them, the name for this species is a mingmuk, which means bearded fur or fur like a beard. So they have this long shaggy fur, protects them, keeps them warm. All of these species in the Arctic have to have cold weather adaptations to survive. These individuals are quite small. You might think they're the size of a bison. No, they're probably about half that size. They're a lot smaller. In this photo here entitled Running Wild, and for those of you who have collected this, congratulations, because it's a very sought after print of mine. And yeah, they're quite a small species. They tend not to be as big as a bison, not at all. So a species that is very long-lived, puts a lot of energy into their young, and has very few young, but puts a lot into it. Not being impacted in the same levels as caribou that the research is showing as to date. We will see, given that this species is so adapted to the cold, what will happen over time. But these individuals tend to be found in the northern parts of the mainland of the Arctic, but then also on all those islands that you saw up there. So Banks Island has a very good population of muskox, as does Victoria Island, where Cambridge Bay is. So incredible species. Looks like a prehistoric species. Woolly mammoths in the flesh almost. So kind of neat. Yeah. Just want to check a few things here. Yeah. Okay. All right. The other species that we have up there is, you might be surprised, living on those barren lands and such, but not on the coastlines, is the barren ground grizzly bear. And there's about 5,000 barren ground grizzly bears in the Arctic, Canada's north. Those populations are quite stable. That amounts to probably about 15% of Canada's populations of grizzly bears. The majority of our grizzly bears occurring in the Yukon and British Columbia here. And again, their numbers are not being impacted. They're primarily a herbivore, so they feed on a lot of grasses and sedges in the summer times and lots of berries and such. And of course, the occasional caribou calf or something like that, if they can find it and if they can capture it. So another species that you can find up there. Beautiful little Arctic ground squirrels. These are known as six-six. You know, for a lot of species, very important species up there for a lot of raptors, and I'll talk about that in a second. Arctic fox, even Arctic wolves. These guys, with the harsh conditions up there, they actually hibernate for pretty much 8 months of the year. So they like to sleep a lot, and that's how they deal with the cold, is put on a lot of resources during the summer and then go for a big nap. And they can live 8 to 10 years. So when you think about that, they spend almost 6-7 years of their life just sleeping, which is kind of interesting, But yeah, an interesting species, the six-six. And lots of bird life up there, especially in the summer. There's very few birds that are there in the wintertime. There would be the ravens, the snowy owls, and some of the ptarmigans. But when we get to the summertime, literally the world, the Arctic tundra just becomes alive because these birds will migrate from the south, some as far as South America. The Arctic tern makes this big travel up to Canada's north to nest and to take advantage again of the resources that are up there in the summer. So the grasses, the lush grasses, very, fewer predators. They nest a lot of times, like if we look at the snow geese and Ross's geese, they nest in colonies. And to your surprise, you might be surprised to learn this, but a lot of these birds are coming for the insect life that's up there in the summer as well. When all of these insects finally emerge, because there's a lot, trust me, sometimes you'll be walking into the wind and your back will be black, or sometimes you'll have to flip yourself every once in a while because you just can't handle the insect life on the front of you. Of course, you have a bug net on, but it can be just that intense in terms of bug life. But a lot of the birds, that's a huge advantage. I mean, they can feed their young, the little goose goslings, they're sitting there picking away at any of the little insects on the leaves and such, and that's rich in a lot of protein. So it helps the little guys grow and to do better. When we look at geese, for instance, that are coming up to the north, literally 15 million snow and Ross's geese nest in Canada's north in the summer. So should the Arctic have a voice? I don't know. A lot of life up there when we're talking the summer, that's for sure. I get few species are there year round, but we have raptors like the peregrine falcon, take advantage of course, the 6-6, the lemming cycle, lots of lemmings in the summer, which are like a small little mouse-like animal. Again, these are a bird species that nest on a lot of cliffs, and there are a lot of cliffs in that habitat up there. So lots of nesting habitat for these guys. When you're nesting on a cliff, an Arctic fox isn't going to get to your nest, an Arctic wolf isn't going to get to your nest. So very safe for some of these species, very well adapted to that life. And here's a perfect example of a golden eagle. And yes, in its talons, if you look really close, there is a 6-6, bringing it back to its eaglet, who is calling. Incredible encounter here. This eaglet would only get fed 2 or 3 times a day. That's all they require. But the eaglet was very unhappy about it as he was growing. And I sat viewing this nest from a blind for 3 days in a row. Just incredible, that background, that backdrop. And that eaglet would call from morning to night, bring me food, bring me food, bring me food. For those of you out there who have had kids or teenagers, maybe you can relate, but sorry, not a funny joke maybe, but I think it's kind of funny. So anywho, it was a really neat experience, and just to see this species living in look at that harsh environment of just rock and lichen. But there is a lot of life that exists throughout that tundra environment and supports a whole bunch of biodiversity that is so important to this planet and to us as well, for the health of us included. So now that environment is beautiful, but I do want to share this with you. So when I'm up there, I feel so grateful for my ability to be there on the ice, or whether I'm there in the summer times and some of the different experiences that I've had. I know that few people get to travel to the Arctic as much as I have. I want to just share this because it is a harsh environment. When we look at some of these species, they are just so well adapted to it. And as a human up there, unless you're dressed so this was a recent conditions, and I wanted to show just traveling in that type of environment on a snow machine. And this was a relatively nice day, if you can believe that. It was actually one of those days where it wasn't that harsh. The next day, what happened though is that a storm blew in. That was just the start of it, and we literally were storm stayed in our cabin for, I believe that trip, it was 8 straight days where you couldn't move. You couldn't even leave because for safety. In some of the Arctic communities in the north, they actually in the wintertime, they will tie rope between door handles or between doors of buildings that are beside each other. And that will be their way of getting from one house or one building to the next building, is by holding that rope, because you literally cannot see. One of the first times that I was up to go onto the polar bear ice, or to go photograph polar bears on the Arctic Ocean ice, I luckily was in the community when the blizzard hit and not out on the land. And from my window of my hotel, I couldn't see anything at all. It was impossible to see in any direction. And that lasted for 2 straight days. So very, very harsh environment. Species that are there deserve our respect, as do the people. Inuit peoples have been there for tens of thousands of years. I mean, it's a question mark of actually how long. But when you're traveling in the Arctic, you see a lot of sign of Inuit peoples. And it's quite amazing to think how they were in harmony with their environment, how they relied on these caribou, how they relied on seals, how they relied on all the different parts of the ecosystem, and how they had enough and they didn't have to worry for the most part, except if there were some natural cycles. But when you talk to some of I've been fortunate to talk to some people that were elders and such, and unfortunately have passed on, but in my 25 years of going there, some of the people that actually grew up on the land, that didn't come off the land until the 70s, and just some of the stories that they had living by dog team and living nomadic quite life, and some of the struggles that they had, and some of the differences that they see now in terms of use of modern technologies and how that impacts things. I want to share this. Some of you might have collected this piece. It's entitled Lasting Legacy. And this is an Inukshuk. An Inukshuk is just a wood or a stone cairn that Inuit peoples left. They were for various different reasons. Sometimes they were markers for a trail. So if you walked up to the top of this one, you would see in the far distance a dot, and you would go, whoa, that must be another spot over there. And it would probably take you almost half a day or a day to walk there. And sure enough, there would be another cairn of rocks. And it was most likely to a hunting ground or to get to different areas. Some of these, though, were quite special as well. And it would be that's where maybe they left one of their family members. Because as family members got older, if they were slowing the group down, then that was part of the tradition, that sometimes they would just leave that family member behind, and they would rest there. That would be their final resting space. So beautiful, beautiful culture, a very non-pressuring culture. As a Southerner, when I come up there, so I call myself a Southerner, they call me a Southerner. It's very, very important for me to be as least pressuring as I can. And even with that, I come across pressuring. They're a culture and a peoples that just go with it. So I shared this story yesterday about how your snow machine breaks down on the Arctic ice. You don't stress about it. You just solve it. It's not something that you worry about. They have many ingenious ways of trying to solve problems, even boiling up a caribou bone to freeze it into a certain position so that it could act as a spring in a snowmobile track. So very, very ingenious, very smart people, very well adapted to that environment. And speaking of adaptations, we know that one of the species that is highly adapted to the Arctic is the polar bear, and the polar bear species. This species actually is the epitome of adaptations to cold weather. This is a photograph weathering the storm, and captured in minus 30-degree temperatures. David and I could only handle about an hour out on the ice. It was almost impossible with how cold it was out there with my hands in my face. David probably could have lasted many hours, but myself not. The metabolism of this bear would have not even changed. So minus 30, no change in metabolism at all. Put them in a plus 30 environment, they would experience what I was experiencing at minus 30. If you took a temperature probe and you put it on the surface of their skin, which is black, you would find that the temperature at their skin is almost the same temperature as the ambient temperature around them. So they are just that well insulated. Incredible, incredible species. Yeah, amazing. And a beautiful species, a species that doesn't have a voice, a species that doesn't have choices given how the temperature of the planet is warming up. And that's all worrisome for people like myself and most likely all of you that are watching tonight in terms of changes that are going to occur on the planet for species like this. Their diet staple is the ringed seal. And when we look at species of caribou, of muskox, and six, and all the bird life, there's a whole nother ecosystem that exists in the Arctic, and that's the Arctic Ocean and the Arctic ice, so where the polar bears live. But everything that's underneath that ice as well. And I'll show you a beautiful video. David told me that when we're out on the ice, sometimes we'll see these ringed seals and they're sunning themselves when the temperatures start to warm up. And he said, if they dive down as we're approaching, he said, just go over to the hole and look down and you'll see them swimming there. And I said, come on, David, really? And I did see something. So I grabbed a little GoPro one year and quickly put it underneath the water when a seal had dived under, and got this curious little individual who was checking the camera out. Very, very gentle species, and a species that, well, they can't move fast on land, but they sure can move fast in the water if they have to. Being able to dive up to depths of 200 feet and hold their breath for many, many minutes, and also need to come up for that breath of air, right? So those cracks in the ice that you just saw there, where they'll actually make little breathing holes underneath the snow that the polar bears will find. Look at that there, eh? Wow, what a beautiful little animal. You can see quite fat, full of a lot of fat. That's why the polar bears, of course, love them. That blubber is so rich in energy and such. And of course, the big male polar bears, they will only eat the blubber. They'll leave the rest behind for other species to feast on. So this image here shows a couple different pictures. I know it's older. I couldn't find something that was more recent and displayed what I wanted to talk about here. Again, you can see where Canada is there, Alaska, Russia, etc., Greenland. And this has 1984, September 14th versus 2012, so about 30 years later. You can really see around those islands in northern Canada how that ice is non-existent, 30 years later. We still have some great, multi-year ice in the high north, but we really don't see that multi-year ice that used to exist among all those islands in northern Canada. And that's worrisome for some species. Look at this ice here. That's awesome. That just shows you, and yay, I'm happy. There's lots of ice there. That's great, right? But when we look at some of these seal breathing holes, there was one time where David looked down a seal breathing hole, and he came up and he said, "Wow." And I said, "Oh, David, why wow?" I didn't know if he had seen a seal or multiple seals underneath the ice. He said, "The ice is so thin." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes, when I was a kid, if you looked down a seal breathing hole, you wouldn't be able to see the bottom of the ice." That is incredible. So this is just the tide coming and going here, but I mean, imagine ice so thick that you can't see the bottom of it, and how much that's changed now when we look down a seal breathing hole and the ice is maybe only 6 or 7 feet deep. It really is quite a change in the lifetime of David, who's in his mid-70s now, and when he was a kid. So, I mean, 50, 60 years ago. Yeah, quite different. And those changes are affecting all kinds of things. When we look at species across, we look at the people that live up there. Across the Canadian Arctic, it's more difficult to travel on the ice, and I can attest to that. Just a few years ago, probably my 7th year on the Arctic Ocean ice with David, I took the lead on one area that we had driven over many, many times with no issue. And as I'm driving across that ice, I don't know, it just felt like I was on the clouds. It was kind of, my snowmobile was kind of going up and down, and I didn't stop, thankfully. And David kind of, drove by me, I think kind of signaling keep the pace up. He didn't want me to get excited because he didn't want me to stop. And we got to rough ice. Rough ice is always safe. You learn that. And he stopped me there and he said, Jason, he said, leave me lead. He said, where you were there was water coming up from your snowmobile track. And if you had stopped, if we had seen a polar bear track, you had stopped, he said, poof, you would have went through the ocean. So it's making travel across the Arctic a lot more complicated for Inuit peoples. Ring seals, you saw that ring seal. They need that ice. That's where they complete their molt in the spring. It's also where they have their pups. If they don't have ice, they can't have their pups in the water. They can't. The pups aren't born in the water. So polar bears, of course, we know declining. They're spending more time on land. Belugas, they're migrating through. So all the different whale species that are up there, bears are eating more eggs. They're eating different things. So there's different impacts on different species. Some species are benefiting, right? Like char, they're feeding longer in the ocean. So the ocean water is beneficial. I want to share this beautiful video of a time I was up in the Arctic, and the ice had kind of changed a bit, and it was a lot closer to where camp was than it had been in other years. And just seeing some of that beautiful life underneath the ice that you don't always get to see or to experience. What a beautiful scene that is. And again, so grateful for experiences like that in the Arctic. The beluga whales are known as the sea canary of the north. So they have to be able to navigate that ice and those open leads. Without that ability, they would, unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to get what they need, is air. So their echolocations are amazing. And if you're ever out in a boat around beluga whales, you can actually hear their echolocations through the water. And the first explorers that came over in the Woodhull boats, that's how they got their name, was Sea Canary of the North, because they were so talkative that they could actually hear them through the Woodhulls. And again, adaptation to that life up there. Polar bears, of course, are a species that are dear to my heart. I really feel like this is a species that is the canary in the coal mine. What happens to polar bears is most likely going to have an impact to all of us, and is going to be predictable of what will happen to a lot of other species and to the life on this planet. So I believe that when we look at this species as a canary in the coal mine, that the benefits of saving this species will be synergistic, meaning that all life on Earth will benefit. And it's a species that is, as much as they're harsh and intense, and they hunt humans, and they are a top carnivore, they're also a gentle, and they have many attributes just like us.
Beautiful scene in this. This is incredible.
This video I think I've shared many times. Some of you probably enjoyed it before, but this mother bear, just wow.
Mother bear nursing her 2 cubs. Wow.
Yeah, incredible moment. And I want to share this video as well with you, that mother bear sometimes just gets a little bit too tired, and those cubs are full of all kinds of energy. So sometimes she gets a nap, and maybe I get to babysit while she gets to nap. Make sure there's no big male polar bears that come around. Just beautiful, beautiful scene of nature. Let's do a quick poll here, everyone. I'm curious to know how many people have had the opportunity to see a polar bear in the wild. If you guys can share, how many people have had the opportunity to see a polar bear in the wild? Curious to know the answer. Okay, right now yeah, people are chiming in. Wow, interesting results. Okay, I'm going to end the poll there. So we have a number of 84% of you have not seen a polar bear in the wild. 15% of you have seen a polar bear in the wild. So for the 15% of you and myself, we're very grateful. It's incredible to see them in the wild. For the 84% of you that have not, I hope that you get an impression and get to experience some of their majesty through my slides, through my images, through what I do. But it speaks to some of the issues that maybe are facing the Arctic, and that is that we don't know a lot about the Arctic. Not all of us get to go and experience it because it's such a far distant land away. And the importance of that space is sometimes hard to understand when you're not there, when you don't actually experience it and you don't know a lot about it. So my hope is to continue to kind of advocate for the Arctic and its importance, because we are directly connected to the Arctic in many different ways through some of the ocean currents and of course through some of those climates and such. And again, we always have to think about how we can make sure that everyone has a chance to know about these amazing locations, these amazing species, and this amazing environment. This was a great encounter with King. Some of you may have collected this piece, and just the raw power of this species. They can reach speeds of a racehorse in a very short distance. I'm always very near my snow machine. For the most part, big male bears want little to do with us because they're such great grand hunters, and 99% of their diet is ring seal. That's their diet staple, and anything else just pales in comparison. So we talk about some of those nests, some of those eider nests, some of those goose nests where some of these species might feed. But the reality is it's just not enough resources for what this species requires to live in a healthy manner. And so it's just not something that is sustainable in the long term for this species. And when I look at this species, one of the biggest changes that I see is when I was, guiding in Churchill, Manitoba, way back when, 30, 20, 25 years ago, I guess, I would see mother bears with the odd time with triplets. I saw most bears with twins. I never really saw too many mother bears with just a single cub. When I started going to the Arctic Ocean ice about 11 years ago and went 9 consecutive seasons, those first few seasons, I never really saw a mother bear with just a single cub. Maybe the odd time. Saw quite a few times where we saw a mother bear with 3 cubs, but just the tracks. Darn, wanted that shot with mother and triplets. Saw a lot of bears with mom and twins. And so some of the stuff that you see out there when you see these bears and these images of bears starving, it might be that those are actually just old bears and unfortunately, not doing well, and the natural course of life has taken care of them. What really is worrisome and where we're really seeing a decline is the fact that mother bears are having less cubs. So a lot of bears now are having singles. And when I'm up there now, I do see a lot of mothers that just have 1 cub as opposed to 2, which would probably be the most common. And why is that? Well, this species is being forced to come off the ice a month earlier and forced to not go back to the ice until a month later. And in a species like this is a marine mammal species. All marine mammals go through something called delayed implantation. So she'll go through her breeding in April, May, and she'll have some embryos in her uterus. But if she's not in good enough condition, she'll just reabsorb them. She won't implant them. depending on the condition she is in September, October, that's when her body makes a decision as to how many cubs she thinks she can successfully have. And then those embryos will implant on the uterine wall and she'll start to grow them. But it's clear that these mothers are not as in good a shape, so they're having less cubs. On to some of those other fun species like the Arctic hare, beautiful little species that loves to forage and needs very little to survive. I'm always amazed at these species and how they can eke out a living, but they do eke out a living. And just incredible to see, eating some of the lichens off of just the rocks and such. Shorter ears because they're adapted to the cold environment. Here, this one is getting all bunnied up. For those of you who know my pieces, you know this piece. And in the high north, where it stays cold all winter, so if you're talking the northern tip of Ellesmere Island, where it's quite cold throughout the summer as well, this species won't even change color. They'll just stay white. They know that snow is pretty much a given on any given day. It can happen, and so they stay white in color. The Arctic wolves, which will hunt them, are a common species. And back after my master's degree, I had an incredible encounter in Canada's Central Arctic, the Queedmont Gulf area. I was up with my good friend Gustav and his friend Dick Kirby's as well, both great, amazing biologists. And one evening we heard some wolves howling in the distance as we were heading back from doing some Arctic fox research. And we stopped our snowmobile. Well, we were having tea and we didn't start our snowmobiles again, but we just sat quiet. We had a pack of 17 wolves walk up to us, 6 or 7 of which surrounded us in a circle. Just an incredible encounter. These species, because they experience so few humans, some of them don't have a fear of humans, and they just want to exist. They just want to be on that land that really is their land, and they have a right to it. And of course, the wolverine, the shy little wolverine that is very tough to see. With this photo here, David told me when I was sitting in my blind, before I went to sit in my blind, because this wolverine was coming to some carrion that was on the Arctic Ocean ice. And he said, I have to tell you this, Jason, when you're in your blind, that wolverine is going to come towards you, then it's going to stop, then it's going to look like it discovered you, and then it's going to run away, like it knows you're there. And he said, the wind is in your favor. That's just a behavior that they do, because then if, typically what would happen is I would get out of the blind and go, oh, darn, it's not going to happen. The wolverine now has discovered you. And he said, if you wait 5 minutes later, that wolverine will be back and he'll just come right through and come right to that carrion. David was absolutely right. He's such a smart man of the land and the ice. And sure enough, I was in a blind. It was kind of tough conditions, a little bit too bright, but beautiful little encounter with a very rare wolverine, which are commonly seen. They cover 30 to 40 miles a day. And every time I've seen a wolverine in the Arctic, all they're doing is running. They constantly are lopping, running. They're just a species that moves and moves and moves. And then the Arctic fox, that species lives on that Arctic Ocean ice. Again, very cold adapted. Its cousin, the red fox, is moving into its territory. Red foxes are much larger than Arctic fox. They will outcompete Arctic fox. And so we're actually seeing a decline in Arctic fox numbers in the southern areas, their southern populations. And when I did my Arctic fox research, I always wondered, where would this research go? What is the value of this research? But now you start to see that some of this research is so valuable, because that research might be important to making decisions on how we manage this situation if red fox continue to go further and further and further north into Arctic fox territory. The red fox is not as well adapted. These Arctic fox are very short. They're very small. They're about the size of a large house cat. You can see how much smaller the ears on the Arctic fox are. These guys will actually slow their metabolism in the winter, so they'll eat a lot less. They'll survive on just their body reserves. And on really, really cold periods, the Arctic fox will actually curl up in a ball and for the most part not move for some really cold periods. It'll realize that it has to just burn through some resources, but that's a better decision than trying to be out there and hunting and looking for things and burning up resources. So very interesting behaviorally and physiologically, the adaptations of certain species. and a fun little guy. That's why I had to research them. So fun. I got to share this video. I know we're going over time here. Thank you for your patience. But first off, this is an experience I had last year with a piece of muktuk that dropped off of Inuit sled. And just a neat little thing. I was, I guess, a little too close to this Arctic fox. It was a little bit worried about this. I was trying to get this little plane. Sorry, you can hear that wind in the Arctic. Look at him. I called it a little muktuk pizza. Muktuk is the skin and the very outer layer of blubber on whales, and so that's a meal or something, a delicacy that Inuit peoples really enjoy. So this Arctic fox is put on a longer lens, and I captured it in something that got left behind. Incredible species. We're going to go to a quick poll here. I'm going to reset the poll, and I'm going to ask everyone, and thank you all for staying on tonight. Wow. I think this is pretty obvious, but how amazing is the Arctic? I think I know what everyone's going to answer, so I'm going to end this poll. Thank you, everyone. Yes, stunning. I'm going to ask you one more question in the polls. Okay. And again, this is kind of a question that I think we all know the answer, but I hope I've helped influence that tonight. So how can we be a voice for the Arctic? And I want you all to stay to the end because I have a really special presentation that I'm going to present to all of you. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a spelling error there in number 3. Lead out family, lead our family and friends in making choices that benefit all life. I'm going to end the poll, of course. Many of you answered all of the above. A few people said lead our family and friends in making choices that benefit all life. Yeah, I want to ask everyone tonight to be ambassadors for the Arctic. The Arctic is very important. It's important for the survival of every species on the planet. If you do a little more in-depth research, you'll realize just how important our Arctic ocean currents are, how our Arctic basically is a filter for a lot of our air, and how everything works together as a cycle. And these species that are there, well, maybe they're actually just our friends letting us know that, you know, hey, things aren't healthy right now and they're declining. And if we can go ahead and be real stewards of the land and stewards of this planet and take care of those species, then we're going to take care of ourselves and our future generations. I want to end by sharing the 2023 Earth Day print. And I overlaid it with the title, but should the Arctic have a voice? And I'm proud to share with you all the new print entitled Judge. This was a male polar bear. I was about 60 meters away. Long lens. My snowmobile engine was running, idling, in case I had to get away. He was definitely curious in who I was, but also cautious. And any polar bear is a dangerous polar bear that can reach speeds of a racehorse in a very short distance of time. And I decided to print this image in a black and white format. And I'm going to go ahead and put the offer up here so you can learn more about this piece on my website. And I hope that you all want to collect it as well, because it is an incredible piece. And I printed it in black and white because to represent some of the things that have been happening. We know we had the Montreal COP15, where the UN and that group is asking governments, the world, to save 30% of our oceans and land masses by the year 2030. So put those into conservation. Thank you to all of you. You've helped us with starting that. We started that in 2010. We know that land is so important for animals. We know that land helps take carbon out of the atmosphere. We know all these things, and my team and I are dedicated to that, and will continue to be dedicated to that. And just a few weeks ago, we had the UN again come out in their climate report and say that we're at dire needs here. We have to stop what we're doing. We have to put the brakes on. Otherwise, we're going to get past a point. So this is black and white. There's no gray. Climate change is not a gray issue. It's not something we have to discuss. It's something we have to act on. We have to quit talking and we have to act. Okay, I'll leave it there. I appreciate all your time. Over the course of the various different nature nights that we've had most recently. And this will be the final series, I believe, this year of our nature nights. We'll end with this one and the Arctic. And I ask you to all celebrate Earth Day this year. The theme of Earth Day is invest in our planet. We can all make changes to help invest in our planet in different ways. Of course, us at All in the Wild are doing what we can through the purchase of lands, continue our conservation, our advocacy, and we ask that you do that as well in the ways that you can. So any little bit can make a big difference. And now I'm here to answer any questions you want to ask tonight. I'm going to stay on for the next 10 to 15 minutes. I know we've been here a while. Again, I appreciate your time. And I believe that I will not be back for a nature night this season. This will be the last one. But I'm keeping that a little bit. I'm going to wait and see how things go. We might have one more in the series, but it's going to depend on a few things. So thank you so much to my community, to all of you, the wild ones out there. You guys are awesome. And I encourage you to go check out the website. Look at the new prints. They're exciting. They celebrate nature. Beautiful, colorful relationship that we have with nature and with each other and with this crazy company, All in the Wild. And I ask you to please support our Earth Day print, judge and collect it, share it with your friends and family, and tell them why. Tell them why you bought them, judge. Thank you. All right, let's go to the questions. Thank you. Lots of thank yous on here. I really appreciate that, everyone. David, Keith, Jennifer, Diane, David, Roxanne, Virginia, David, Mary, all of you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Where are you going this summer? Virginia asks. Undetermined at this point. There will probably be perhaps another excursion to back to Newfoundland to capture some of that area a little bit more in depth. I'm hoping to be in the Arctic in the next couple of weeks, back on the Arctic Ocean ice. Some of those travels are quite complicated, so I've had a little bit of a hiccup with my new guide. But I'm crossing my fingers, and I'm just grateful for all the experiences I have had. But I hope that I will have the opportunity to go there. And then, of course, I'll be shooting locally and in various different areas, the Rockies, northern Canada, and of course, hopefully out in Ontario as well. This is such an amazing country. There's so much to take in. So there's a lot, Virginia, that I try to take in, but also trying to limit my impact on everything. So. Thank you, Tatiana. I appreciate that. Thank you, Deb and Bob. Thank you so much, Michelle. Oh, thank you, Dorothy. Yeah. Any questions you want to ask about the Arctic at all? If there's any questions that you would like to ask, please feel free. I know I shared more of my experiences tonight. Thank you, Mark. Very, very kind comments. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much. Yeah, appreciate it. Has David retired? Yes, David has retired. So during COVID, David was with the Inuit communities up there with COVID. They could not travel. They could not go out on the land as much because any situation where COVID came into the community could be very dangerous. They don't have the same healthcare resources that we do. During that time, David did not travel as much. He was not out as much hunting and fishing and such as he does. He subsistence lives off the land. And David got a little bit older in terms of his mobility. So for safety reasons, David cannot take me out anymore, but thank you for asking. And I still stay in touch with David. We talk on a regular basis. He's just such a kind man and gave me many great gifts, many great gifts. Is it a good idea to go to Churchill to see the polar bears? Dorothy asks. Dorothy, I think that I really cannot say I would be calling myself a hypocrite. I think that again, limiting our travel as much as possible is so important. And if we are going to travel, maybe we travel one time to go see the polar bears in Churchill. I think that if you go see the polar bears in Churchill, tell their story to everyone, and share it, and make the excursion about being able to share why they're important, and what your experience told you about them. Give back. I mean, there's ways to give back to polar bears in different ways. Again, we have to start to think about our footprint in many ways, and a big part of this, and I know it's not something that's maybe politically correct, but a big part of this is that there's too many humans, or we're far beyond our carrying capacity as one individual species on the planet. And there's not enough room for all species if one species is just so elevated in their numbers. And so we have to lower our birth rates, and this is reality. And we have to be at a 1 or 2 billion carrying capacity. That's what humans were years ago, hundreds of years ago, and that's probably the carrying capacity that we can sustain on the planet. So it doesn't necessarily make good sense, though, in terms of economics, and that's part of the things. But we're getting into deeper issues. So Dorothy, go enjoy the polar bears. Tell their story to everyone, and share it. Linda asks, are you still using duct tape on your cameras due to the cold cracking them? Well, Linda, I still have the odd camera that cracks in the cold. I haven't had to use a David fix in a while. Maybe they've created a little bit better situation with some of the housings on the camera. But yeah, anytime I'm in the Arctic, it's very hard on camera gear. But I'm very careful with plastic bags and such, and try to take care of my gear as best I can. But yes, David saved my trip one year with helping out with some duct tape and some string. So awesome memory, Linda. I love that. Do you tours or have a recommendation to watch Aurora Borealis in Saskatchewan? Susan asks. Susan, actually, the northeastern part of the province of Saskatchewan is a very good area to see Aurora Borealis. I and my sister and a couple of my other siblings recently traveled up to a place called Little Bear Lake, and we stayed at the Little Bear Lodge there, Little Bear Lake Lodge. Very nice couple. We were supporting local. They're quite slow in March. And it was a great place to go, and they have very high probability of seeing northern lights if there's good aurora forecast. Everyone here should know that we're coming into a solar storm eruption peaks over the next 2 to 3 years. So we're going to see a lot of northern lights, which is going to be really exciting for us. So yes, by all means, Susan, I would head up to an area in northeastern Saskatchewan. You can go up to Little Bear Lake, Hudson's Bay, Saskatchewan, any of those areas, Waskesiu as well. But it's surprising. Just going a little bit to the east in Saskatchewan, I know I live part-time at the south end of Prince Albert National Park, and we actually don't get as many northern lights as the northeastern part of Saskatchewan does at times, which I'm always surprised. But the northern lights, the magnetic North Pole is just a little bit north of Churchill, Manitoba, and that's the area where the particles are attracted to. So if you draw a circle around there, that gives you an idea of where that maximum intensity is, Susan. And so the northeastern part of Saskatchewan is actually a better part. Since you said that 90% of your photos from State of Grace were on film, what do you prefer about film compared to digital? Tammy, I think when I look at film photography, you really had to know your camera settings. You had to know kind of everything about. In the same light, you knew that when an image was coming out, it was the actual image, actually what I saw. We would color match to the slide and such. And so nowadays, it's great that there's digital technology out there. Sometimes it's hard to know what's real and what isn't real. Again, if we're promoting nature and conservation and advocacy, then I guess it is what it is. And I'm a purist. I always will be. So you can be guaranteed that what I see is what I'm going to share with all of you. So great question, Tammy. I just think the film was kind of a more pure choice back in the day. Who owns the land in the Arctic? The Canadian government, the Inuit peoples, depending on treaty rights. So a lot of times when we look at some of these big mines and such that come in there, that all has to do with land claims and signing agreements with local communities. And when we look at the local communities, it's hard for them not to choose to go ahead and make some choices with the mines and such, because there is a lot of economic spin-off. I mean, if you're a community of 1,000 and there's 200 to 300 jobs that are going to be there. I don't think that we can deny that, that's a pretty attractive situation. And Inuit peoples have been modernized. I mean, they don't travel out on the land on dog team. They travel with a snowmobile, so they need fuel in their vehicles. They have local grocery stores. It's not all country food, so they're not just eating caribou and fish. And so all of that costs money. So Cecilia, it's they're coming into the economics of what we do as well in the southern part of this country. So is it possible for a private organization like All in the Wild purchase land in the Arctic for conservation? I wish, Brenda. If we could, we would. Actually, I would say that our only hope with any of that, Brenda, is to continue to do grassroots, continue to encourage the Canadian government to limit our footprint in certain areas of the country, and continue to make our own differences in the ways that we can. We really have to be a strong voice for nature as much as we can if we want to continue to have a healthy planet and a healthy planet for all life. So in terms of being able to buy land in the Arctic, Brenda, it's not possible. It's not something that is possible. It's something that you've just given me to think, though, because with Inuit peoples, I do have some inroads to have some conversations with some elders, and maybe it's time to have some different conversations. So thank you for that, Brenda. You might have just given me a gift, but lobby governments. That's all we can really do, lobby governments. And again, check what you're supporting. So our purchases, our needs, the way that we act, our actions are what determine what goes on. So I'll just give one example. I'm not trying to pick on any industry at all, but I will say that there is no necessity for diamonds on the planet. So we don't need diamond mines in the Arctic. I'm not making any judgments there. Okay, please. I'm not, I would be calling the kettle black. So what are the insects Marg and David eat and ask? They horseflies and mosquitoes the size of bald eagles. No, I'm kidding. Just so much life. There's so much water up there, Marg and David. And so when it warms up, these hatches happen, and the black flies, the mosquitoes, the horseflies, it's almost impossible. The first kind of few weeks or week or 10 days that you're there as a human and you're experiencing that, it's really complicated for you. You have to really get through it mentally. Then you get used to it and you're fine. And so do the species. The species are adapted to it. So yes, some caribou can go crazy, lose a pint of blood, but it's just a big, I mean, the Arctic in the summer is just this big burst of life. I mean, there's birds hatching and there's insects and there's all the caribou. I mean, historically, there was millions of caribou running across that landscape, and now there's very few caribou there. I'm hoping it's just part of a natural cycle, because they do cycle, but they're really, really in decline. We really have very few bearing ground caribou in Canada's north. So Dorothy asks, we had Aurora Borealis here in Chicago area about a week ago. It was such a great surprise. Yeah, Dorothy, they are coming a lot further south. And like I say, the next couple of years, you're going to see that a little bit more. We're really getting some great eruptions. You're welcome, Susan. Susan asks again, how could we depend on our political system when there is continued support for the tar sands? Susan, again, these are all complicated issues that it's very, very tough. I mean, again, I'm going to say that the base of the issue is that humans have gone beyond their carrying capacity. And if we can get the human numbers down over the next 40, 50 years by lowering that birth rate, we really can bring nature back in a good way. Again, our economics and the economic policies of the world, because again, we all want to grow economically. Maybe we have to rethink that, because nothing grows forever. Nothing does. Evergreen trees grow a long time, but eventually they end as well. And we can't keep growing the human population. It's not sustainable. And what are we going to do? Go to the next planet and do the same thing? So anyway, are there many flowers in the Arctic? Yes, Janine, there are many flowers that live in the Arctic. Great question from my sister. I love that. Thank you, Janine. Many different flowers. And again, talking about that burst of life. So when all these insects come out, guess what's happening? All the flowers are flowering because all those insects are going and looking for that nectar and such, and then pollinating the other flowers. So you can literally walk over a hill and you'll just have a white field of mountain avens, which is just, wow, it's so exciting. Yeah, there's just so much life. Arctic fox. They're one of the most, they're known as an R strategist, which means they don't live necessarily a long time. They don't put a lot of resources into their young. So they live a short life, but they live a very big and bold life. They can have up to 20 young in one litter. So it's the way the Arctic is. It's this really big kind of plethora of life in the summer times, and it goes through cycles. And again, let's hope that that caribou cycle is a cycle that's just a cycle. Amanda says, is there much wildlife rehabilitation in the Arctic? No, Amanda, there isn't. No, nature kind of takes its course up there, from what I understand. So no, there isn't much rehabilitation. I know that some of the polar bears that are in our zoos in southern Canada came from Churchill, Manitoba area when maybe a bear had been accidentally destroyed somehow, or something might have happened that way. So, but yeah, as far as I know, there is no rehabilitation in the Arctic. Natasha says, Tatiana wants to know how you stay warm when you're there. Well, lots of really good clothing, lots of food. Actually, your body is using a lot. I lose weight when I'm there, though. I have some Inuit clothing, so there's something, an inner sock that's made out of down, and basically that inner sock in my boot really helps me. They all have them, and David's wife Susan made me a beautiful pair, so I wear those. I have a big kind of Canada Goose jacket, no coyote fur on the hood, just an FYI. And so I have a big Canada Goose jacket, lots of layers, and then that wicking layer at the bottom, so merino wool, so that you're basically wicking that water and that moisture away from you. So, and yeah, lots of hot tea breaks, and getting out of the wind. The wind can really cut you up there. So one time we had to go to, we had a situation where we had a snowmobile breakdown, and we had to go back to meet someone halfway back to the community. And David didn't want to leave me at the cabin by myself just for safety reasons. And it was really, really cold. And I had to ride on the Comatech, and he knew how cold it would be. So Natasha, Tatiana, he actually put caribou skins on me. And you would be amazed at how warm those caribou skins were. And that's something that they would wear because they do hunt caribou, and they use everything they can. So, yeah. What was your focus when you researched Arctic foxes, Angela asks. Specifically, I was looking at the impact of nesting geese on Arctic fox populations. So we know that Arctic fox depend heavily on the lemming cycle in Canada's Arctic. They also depend a lot on the polar bears in terms of cleaning up some of the leftovers that polar bears leave behind, ring seals and such. They don't eat them all. And so I was looking at the impact of Arctic geese, because there's a lot of geese there in the summer, but then they're not there. So what happens with this situation? Well, it turns out that Arctic fox are very good at caching food. So they actually hide food in the ground, and the ground acts like a natural refrigerator. And what I learned, Angela, was actually that some Arctic fox were caching upwards to 10,000 eggs over the summer to basically dig up the rest of the year and feast on. So yeah, they would dig them up. They might be froze, but they would be able to get them enough, warm them up in their mouth and chew on them and such, to get all the nutrients that were in those eggs. So you had these little packets of energy that the Arctic fox would find. So in the springtime, I analyzed some of their scat, and I would actually find goose egg remains in their scat in the spring, even before the geese arrived. So, early May, there's not a goose there. Well, some of the Arctic fox scat had goose eggs in it. So really interesting. I ended up determining that Arctic fox in localized areas where there was nesting geese colonies really were impacted by the nesting geese. Yeah. Am I going to be at the Distillery Area Gallery in Toronto in 2023? Hopefully, Susan, at some point. Hopefully I will be there. Yes. No exact dates yet, but hoping to. Thank you for visiting the Distillery Gallery, and thank you all for visiting all of my galleries across the country. So thanks so much for that question, Susan. And with that, it kind of looks like the questions have slowed down, and I really appreciate them all. Again, if you ever want to reach out to me, you can through the website. Just hit the Contact Us button, and by all means, you can go ahead and ask any questions, and those will come from the office and get to me directly. So, You're welcome, Angela. Yeah, isn't it fascinating about the Arctic fox and them caching all those little eggs? Linda says, I hope so. Toronto Distillery Area Gallery. Okay, well, we'll try to have some type of adjacent event out there, maybe Niagara on the Lake as well. So we'll try to plan that in 2023. I find my life has gotten quite busy these days, so we'll try to plan it all. Okay, everyone, happy April. Earth Day is coming, the 22nd. Please be great celebrators of Earth Day. Enjoy all the new prints. Please share Judge with everyone you know. Tell them why it's black and white. Tell them why I released it. And tell them how important our polar bears are for the health of this planet and the health of all species and the rights of all life. So happy Easter. Thank you, Dan. That was great. Happy Easter. Yeah, happy Easter to you all. So take care out there, wild ones, the community of nature lovers. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night. Thank you for attending the Nature Night webinars this season again. And signing off here. Happy spring, Jason. Thank you, Cecilia. Happy spring. You're welcome, Keith and Sandra. You're welcome, Natasha, Tatiana. All right. Would love an event in Niagara on the Lake. Okay, Kate, I see that. Thanks, Marla. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Take care, everyone. Keep loving nature. Bye for now.